Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Enterprise Growth Alliance very first webinar, Mastering the Self-Serve Journey. And I will read the rest of the title because it's so long, Empowering Your Prospects to Make Their Own Choices and Choose You in the Process, which is a very long title, in my opinion. My name is Behncke, and I am the Chief Growth Officer at Iron Horse. We have a great conversation planned for you. But before we get into that conversation, I want to tell you just a little bit about EGA. If you're not already familiar, we were just talking about it. The Enterprise Growth Alliance is a program where we are bringing together a set of vendors and agencies and other parts of the ecosystem, because we fully believe that in order to do the best job for our clients and our clients' buyers, we need to work together in a really cooperative way. Too often, vendors have gone to market in a very, very siloed way with their blinkers on. And the people that are on this call and part of this Enterprise Growth Alliance believe that the value is in the ecosystem. And so we all want to work together to be able to bring the value to you. One of the very first deliverables that we've had with the Enterprise Growth Alliance is our Buyer Insights Report. And we're going to make that available to you in the chat. And we're going to refer to that somewhat in this webinar. And if you haven't read it, by all means, give it a download, take a look at it. I think you'll find it interesting. Before we jump in, let me introduce our speakers. First, we have Blake Burnett, who is our social media manager at Iron Horse. We love having Blake here because he very much focuses on the innovation in social media and looking at marketing strategies that can help our clients at the early part of the journey, which is where our focus is going to be. Next, we have Mark Hummel, head of digital marketing at Demandbase. I love having Matt. Sorry, I said Mark. I love having Matt here. I love having Matt here because the thing we've spoken with Matt before, we do a tremendous amount of work with Demandbase, is Matt has seen the trends and the journeys over a long period of time in marketing. And I think it's really interesting to be able to look at how things have changed over time. So I'm really looking forward to how he has internalized putting customers first. Last but not least, we have Seele, who is head of digital marketing at Drift. And if you're familiar with Drift, it won't be a surprise to you that Caitlin is incredibly passionate about personalization in the customer journeys. And so we're going to pick her brain on that. So the research that we did on the buyer's journey, we're kind of thinking about it in two portions. The first portion, which is what this webinar is about, is early parts of the journey. So from they don't even know that they need something different, to they're starting to get engaged. Before we get into the specifics of the journey, the question that I had, first of all, because this is research-based and it's always kind of interesting, what do you think that people think is true that's not true anymore? So people have truths that get stuck in their head and it's not true anymore. And those are the things we're going to try and break apart. So anybody want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Monica. I think this question is really interesting because one of the things that I have heard a lot of people say is true is we're sort of past the unprecedented times, which was that overused word about 4 years ago now, which is hard to believe. But when COVID hit and marketers were really forced to change their ways, right? Like we really had, if you wanted to be successful, you had to really shift away from kind of the traditional playbooks, the old approaches. You had to be a lot more intentional and empathetic, not just in your messaging, but even in your offer strategy. And you had to make sure at the end of the day that you truly understood, your customers' needs and what they were going through in that very moment. And I think a lot of marketers are sort of like, well, those days are gone. Thank goodness we can move on to kind of how we used to do things pre-COVID. And I'm just seeing part of it is the current macroeconomic conditions, but we're really not past that. And frankly, I think there were good things from a marketing perspective and how we ultimately had to put our customers first that we shouldn't move away from ever.
So your truth is that the empathy that we learned doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
I think building on that too, it's that this shift to a digital first, really self-service led buying journey, it's here to stay. Even though we're all probably starting to go back to conferences, in-person events, you know what I mean, networking opportunities, those kinds of in-person touch points are more like components of a digital led buying journey. So we kind of have to rethink how we're mapping that entire nurture flow and where things fit in and how we're going to continue to follow up and engage those in-person connections in like a self-service digital first way.
So your truth is digital didn't go away.
Yeah, it's not back to as it was, right? I think it's really fundamentally changed, you know, how we seek information, whether it's in our personal lives or in a professional setting looking for tools and software.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to jump on that, I think that, you know, digital was already on the pathway of kind of taking over, and the pandemic is essentially just kind of expedited that process. And, you know, businesses now need to, you know, adapt more to more of a collaborative, buyer-centric approach to be able to close more deals successfully. And, you know, just the overall decision-making process as well. So.
Mm-hmm. One of the truths that kind of got busted for me, maybe it wasn't a truth, but it was a long-term belief when we did the survey, was one of the cuts that we did that you'll see in the ebook is we looked at the most senior executives, so the C-suite, the SVPs, the EVPs, and the assumption was always that their journey was less digital than the people that worked for them. They want, you know, the golf outing and the white glove treatment and you know, the in-person visits. And what came out in the research, and it didn't matter what way I cut it, you know, what kind of industry, what kind of company size, it always came out that the most senior executives were actually more digital in their journey than the people that were working for them, or the more junior level executives. Is that a surprise to you guys?
Not for me. I mean, I've seen this now for a few years, even back when I was supporting more of the financial services industry. It's kind of the next generation of leaders where they're coming from more of a, you know, a tech-centric background, a tech-enabled background. And so I think they grew up in the day and age where digital was, they may have been practitioners themselves, and there's just sort of that expectation. And Caitlin, I think you said it really well around the personal, you know, how we use digital in our personal lives. And there really is, you hear a lot of people say B2B is starting to look a lot more like B2C. And I think a lot of that is sort of the influx of just personal consumption, you know, personal use of digital in our own lives.
Totally. I feel like you can't assume who's on your site anymore, right? Because you're getting such a broader range of people looking for information on your website from all across the buying committee, right? You know, whoever might be the admin of your platform to a MOPS user, right? Operations user, you know, a C-suite executive. So I think it makes it really important to think about your website and your just overall digital approach in terms of crafting out journeys for each of those three personas and finding moments where you can engage them no matter what channel it's on, to kind of start to figure out who they are and what they care about and retarget them in that way.
If we're talking about digital and we're thinking about that and comparing, you know, several years ago where the roles of sales and marketing had some assumptions behind it about how we address the buyers during the journey. And now that things are so much more digital all the way through, you know, the buying committee, how does that change the roles of sales and marketing? What do they have to do different? Is that starting to shift from where it was, you know, 5 years ago, say, and where it's going in the future? Lots of nodding. So maybe we could have some words to go along with the nods.
Well, I think on that point, one of the things that needs to happen with sales and marketing is being more collaborative, to be able to really understand how, you know, the overall buying journey and be able to have more of a personalized approach. So, you know, the sales and marketing team need to be, you know, hand in hand and more communicative to be able to, you know, generate the results that they're looking for. And, you know, that's, you know, I'm sure that Matt and Catlin could probably talk to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly, Blake. And I think in addition to that, it's not just enough to engage them. You really have to understand what their individual needs and wants, and even the language that they're speaking, right? And so you could have, a number of different functions, roles within your buying group, and that one sort of one size approach fits all just doesn't work. If you've got to be able to connect with the buyer, the end user, the people who are going to be financing it and making, decisions ultimately that they feel will best support overall business objectives. So, you really have to get granular around the use of, and that's what digital is so great at, is it enables you to do that.
I couldn't agree more. And like your buyers are going to notice that misalignment, right? Like I think we have to remember as marketers that your buyers aren't going to know whether something that they're engaging with is a marketing touch point or a sales touch point, right? They just know they got an email from your company. They don't know if it's a marketing email from me from a nurture program, right? Or an SDR's outbound sequence. So it makes it so important for those teams to talk so that handoff is smooth. Whether they're talking to someone in marketing or on sales, you're not sending the same messages in different contexts. You're not being overly repetitive. That's what buyers are going to notice. And they're like, oh, wow, that company does not know what's going on, right? So it just makes it important for us internally, right, as two teams, but also for the buyer.
So, go ahead.
I'll say that's why, providing a seamless user experience and ensuring a smooth, initiative online experience from, navigating the website to consuming the content, all the digital touch points, all of it needs to be really seamless. And it is, where it doesn't come off salesy and it feels organic. And that's why whenever working with marketing, and we're also working with sales, being able to communicate that and streamline it throughout all of your different touch points.
So Caitlin, you used a word, I'm gonna poke at it a little bit. You used the word handoff. In the old days, I used to think of the handoff as the handoff from marketing to sales, and it was a hard handoff. Since that's really not the world anymore, how do you stay coordinated between sales and marketing? Because there isn't this point in time where, it goes over the fence to another function.
I think it can be really important to almost like go back to the basics and like find a whiteboard. Like, I'm not kidding. And like map out your buyer journey and be like, okay, at this level of activity, that's when a sales queue, that's when the sales team is going to get pinged and alerted. How do the marketing touch points continuously maybe decrease and the sales touch points increase? And also like learn from each other, right? Like sales folks have really expert insights into what buyers are actually talking about, what they're caring about. Make sure you're getting that two-way messaging exchange, right? So like the messaging is smooth. And as one team is maybe like limiting their engagement with a certain contact or prospect, the other team is picking up in parallel. And like also that it can go both ways. Like sometimes someone isn't ready to buy, right? Sales might disqualify one of your buyers. That doesn't mean that they're not ready forever. It just means not this quarter or not for the next 6 months. So make sure you're thinking about how are our re-engagement flows also going to work, right? After maybe 6 months, a year, there can be some really valuable things going on there, especially today. In kind of this environment, someone who's not ready to buy today might be really ready to buy next year. You don't want to lose out on that awareness.
I love that imagery of mapping the touch points with the two of them. It's almost like a teeter-totter of who's doing the work, as opposed to like changing shifts at the factory where one goes out and the other comes in. Sorry, Matt, I think I might have cut you off.
No, I was just I was completely agreeing with everything Caitlin was saying. I'm a huge proponent of whiteboarding too, and I think just getting that visual alignment is so important. And it's funny when she said handoff too, my ears sort of perked up. And knowing Caitlin, I knew what she meant. But I think one of the things that we've done really well at Demandbase to help really create and maintain that alignment is what we call weekly ABX stand-ups. And it's not a big meeting. It's not between sales and marketing leadership. It's literally at the segment marketer, SDR, and account owner, the AE, those three meeting on a weekly basis, literally for just 15 minutes. And the frequency, being weekly and sort of the short nature of the meeting, 15 minutes, makes it a really effective touch point. And, and it ensures that, it kind of ensures that there's mutual accountability. Here's what we talked about doing. Not only did you do it, but how's it performing? And so it's not a way to point fingers, but really you think about it, more like a soccer team, right? Where a lot of times to score goals, you're passing the ball backwards and you're passing it totally across the field in between different sides of the field. And so there's sort of this notion that it takes everybody, and you never know, what your role is, but some players have better games than others, right? But at the end of the day, you win and you lose together. And so you're sort of continuing to pick each other up along the way, knowing that at the end of the day, your ability to create pipeline is not contingent on marketing, and having a great webinar or whatever. It's really everybody coming together and doing their part.
Yeah. I love the analogy and that the thought of the soccer team. I really agree with that. And it's a good way to think about it and a good way to frame it. One of the things, though, when you move from the relay race or the handoff to the soccer team, in the relay race, it's really easy to at least believe that you can measure these people did this and these people did this piece as you go to the goal line. When you get to the soccer team, how do you measure that? How do you measure the contribution?
Well, this is near and dear to my heart because, Demandbase is the first company I've worked for where we have this philosophy of everyone sourced pipeline, and pipeline or revenue really kind of being the North Star that everyone's driving towards. In past lives, when we'd have marketing source and sales source, that was kind of the measuring stick if we're being successful. I never liked it, right? Because I always felt like it was pitting sales and marketing against each other. We'd have different sets of data very often. There would be debates over, was that really marketing source, or should marketing get influence for that? And so it was just unhealthy. At the same time, if marketing was hitting their numbers, it was a really great way to say, hey, good job, you're doing your thing, move on. Sales needs to get better at closing. When in reality, that's just not the case, as we know. But to answer your question, how do you measure success? We really look at it kind of in similar ways, but we take away the, like the pointing of fingers aspect of it by saying, it goes back to Caitlin's whiteboarding. What are the things that we need to do in order to ultimately drive success? And so some of those are going to be marketing things, some are going to be sales things, some are going to be collaborative. And so it's looking at those individual campaigns, programs, motions, and seeing how they performed. It's the attribution side of what's working and what's not. And then there still is some accountability piece, right? If your SDR has an SLA or things like that, where you do want to hold each other accountable towards, what you've set forth as that kind of process. But at the end of the day, you're measuring success ultimately through one thing, and that's, are we creating the pipeline that we need and ultimately closing that pipeline how we want to?
I love the idea of everyone sourced. It's driven me crazy for years that who gets credit piece of it, because I think that a decade ago, that was the only way we could think about it. We didn't have the insights. We didn't have the tools. We didn't have the ability to coordinate. Mm-hmm. And measurement needs to catch up with the way that buyers are buying and we are addressing them. So I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We've talked a little bit about kind of the change in the buyer's journey and what that means and what being a more digital buyer's journey means for sales and marketing, the way that we operate. I want to, with that as the background, start thinking about the early part of the journey. So the early part of the journey where people are doing trends research. So they may even be in a pre-intent. So they may not even know that they have a problem that needs to be solved or an opportunity that they're not taking advantage of. So how do you guys think about getting people in that pre-intent? Now, I don't even know that I have a problem, to start to loosen the status quo, to start to think, oh, maybe there is something I should be doing different. Can you have any tips or tricks for the audience?
I think show, not tell can be a really good thing to fall back on, right? Like as marketers, we kind of tend to share a lot of the same pain points, right? At other companies in different ways, in different contexts, but we're always talking about, all right, how do I deliver personalization at scale, right? How do I help my conversion rate? How do I do that alignment with marketing and sales? It can be great for a brand to like demonstrate thought leadership in terms of showcasing, like whether it's a customer or even your own team, right? How you've done something that's made an incremental impact on your business. That's the kind of thing that people want to try themselves, right? Take back, go apply to the team. So that focus on like sharing like tactics, templates, kinds of things can all be really helpful in the channels that your target audience works most in. And that might not be some of the channels you used to use 2 or 3 years ago, right? That might have changed.
Do you think B2B companies have FOMO? Do you think they worry about missing out on stuff?
I'm going to say it's kind of in between, but primarily no. I don't think that they have so much. Maybe they should have more FOMO, because I mean, especially within on the media side, I mean, there is a constant change going on all different platforms, and a lot of B2B companies they've been using the same platform for years, and it's been working for them. So like, why should they invest to another platform? If what they've been using is still working. But with the change in the digital landscape, it's, I feel like it is important to, try to experiment more and look into other platforms, other channels that you can further expand your audience, for your exposure, and be able to create additional touch points to be able to, to increase that buyer's journey and make it more personalized across new channels that could potentially improve on the ones that you already have.
You said something interesting there that I want to pick up on and just toss out about if it's not broken, don't change. And we see that we see that a lot, for everybody everywhere. But I'm thinking about the current economic climate. And do you guys have the opinion that in a current, more constrained economic climate, are people more conservative and risk adverse to say, I don't want to do anything different? Or has the pressure prompted them to say, it hasn't been working, I've got less resources, potentially I need to do something different? So which side do you think you fall on in terms of, the correlation between the economic climate and risk aversion?
Yeah, well, I think that's where it's, to Blake's point, it's less about FOMO and it's more about FOMO, where it's that fear of messing up. And
Love that.
I think it depends on the buyer. I think good, strong, if you're selling into marketers, right? I'll use that as an example. Really strong marketers are going to not rest on their laurels and say, well, we're in a tough environment, I really should be just super cautious about my spend, and just keep plugging away. If I can just work harder, if I can send one more email. Reality, that they probably know that's not the answer, but they're just so risk adverse. Whereas I think, if you've got stronger marketers who are more possibly in tune with what's out there, and frankly, they just know at the end of the day, they have to hit their number one way or another. And so they're going to go tooth and nail to make that happen. And I think that's where, as companies selling into these companies, our ability to really message that sense of urgency around why change and why now is so important. Because if you can do that and you can tie it to sort of address those fears of change or fears of messing up, it can just be so impactful and powerful in terms of really helping the marketers, and again, in this example, who get it, to say, you're right. I need that. I need that to help me go and do what needs to be done for my business.
I'm totally going to steal FOMO.
I'm sure I stole it from somebody else too. So
okay, good. See, that's what the Enterprise Growth Alliance is all about. It's sharing within the ecosystem.
That's right.
I do think, to build on that too, I think this is where like testing can be your best friend. Like if you find you're having some pushback in terms of, we just want to double down on what we've always done to work on, just test. Because in general, no matter what the economic situation is, if you're not testing, you're not growing, right? We always need to be finding new tactics, types of campaigns, channels, no matter what. So test. That takes away some of the big bets that might, scare some people, but enables you to really still be that thought leader, thinking through, all right, here's this new approach. You're gonna, have some losses, but in the long run, you're gonna have way more wins that are going to become really standing strong pillars in your marketing mix and your program. So just test, and make sure you've got the reporting in place to measure the results.
Well said. Well
Good
said.
advice. So one of the things that we found out when we were doing our insight survey may or may not be a surprise, but it was the dominance of social media at the very beginning of the journey for discovery, for research. I remember doing this kind of research years ago, and it was always search, right? And search always came up as this huge dominance. This one, it was all the social platforms. That's where everybody is going. So I'm going to start with you, probably, Blake, because you spend all your time in there. Social media is under a huge amount of pressure right now in the consumer world. You know, there's authenticity issues. You know, everything that's going on with Twitter. There's skepticism in some camps, and there's like overbelief, like the echo chamber overbelief. Hard to find truth. How much of that do you think is spilling into B2B, since it's clearly this is where buyers are going to learn? Has it happened? Is it going to happen? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought on that, it's about your content marketing approach. So how you go about it. So essentially, if you're on social media and you want to make sure that you are being as authentic as possible towards your brand, and being able to be show that you are a thought leader, and be able to be more community based. So if there is a lot of skepticism against social media now, especially on the consumer side, as you said, but it really boils down to really getting in front of your audience in a way where they can trust you by the way you approach your marketing strategy and the content that you put out. So I feel, yes, that is definitely something that is could be of an effect, but there is the solution to that, and it's all about your approach.
Well, we'll have to get more details on what our approach should be from you.
Yeah. So again, it's really honing in on community building and being more personalized in how you're communicating to your audience, being able to provide educational and content that is valuable to your ICP, to also be able to guide them along to what you actually provide as a company, and how that actually meets their certain pain points. But doing it in a way that's authentic to your brand and authentic to what your audience is looking for.
When you said the word community, everybody's head started going like the Bobby doll, the Bob dolls. And I get the sense that there are platforms for communities. Is there a best platform? Is there a mapping of platforms to communities? Like, how does somebody sort that out?
Well, with that as well, I mean, it also really depends on the company. So, for instance, for B2B, LinkedIn is really great for that. I mean, with most marketers will know that. So, and you can use things like Reddit as well, has a really good community-based forum to be able to speak to your audience as an organization. But again, it really depends on your brand and on where your audience and where they're located, to be able to identify which social channel is primarily the best place to start building that community. And then once you've kind of established a certain community on one platform, then you can start expanding further and going onto another edge to be able to build out your exposure.
Reddit came up on the survey. It was a 100% B2B survey, and it was sort of a surprise, at least to me personally. Matt, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, in a way, it was a surprise to me too. And sort of my takeaway is, on one hand, interesting, we should probably be exploring Reddit more. On the other hand, it's, we shouldn't, to Blake's point, we shouldn't assume that that's the right community for our audience. And I think, Caitlin, I know you'll appreciate this, but being on the digital side, where we're primarily using paid media in support of our goals, you shouldn't also assume that you have to go sort of all in on a channel like a Reddit or Twitter or a LinkedIn from a paid perspective. If you, whether or not your community's there, as I've really started to further explore Reddit, what I realized is, yeah, we could put money towards it, but if we really want to be successful and use that as a community, we have to, be able to invest time and energy into Reddit, into building more of that organic community, which then we can really scale through some advertising dollars. And it's no different than, in a sense, LinkedIn, Facebook. They're great platforms, whether it's just creating that organic community and or using it as a means of testing new messaging, to where you can get a sense of what's resonating, and then again, go and scale that up with some media dollars.
I couldn't agree more with any of that, Matt. And I think leaning into that organic strategy first is really the way to go. And also when you do find, right, a social media channel or an online community where your buyers are and they are engaging with you, don't like mess with the good thing. Like, don't try to bring them somewhere else. I think as digital marketers, we can get in a trap of like, it's all about the click-through rates, right? And the conversion rates. Like if someone's engaging with you in comment threads, right? And like asking questions, just answer them there. You know what I mean? Send them the registration link to the webinar right there, register them right there in that flow. Don't try to take them to another location, right? That's going to really enable people to come back to that same community, right? Back to you there and engage with you there because they know that's where you're engaging. They really want to have those kinds of real humanized conversations with your brand. They don't want to see ads that are like download 5 steps to whatever right now, right? They want to be able to like ask questions, get answers, talk with people on your team right there. Enable them to do that.
Yeah. Caitlin, I'm really curious. Years ago, I worked for a very large enterprise, and it was very at the beginning of the social media world. And I remember walking into their organization, and like almost an entire floor was the social media team. And they were the people that were going to answer all the questions. Lots of companies can't make that investment. How has the world changed in terms of how companies and brands authentically engage in flow that the way that you're talking about? Because the nice thing about sending them someplace is you're in control. We love control, right? With that, and you're out in the wild, and how many people have to do that? Like, how do you organizationally handle that?
Yeah, I think there's a few really interesting things you can do here. And I'm sure Blake has a lot to add as well. You can look into even like, say, this is a paid tactic, but like a conversation type ad, where it is automated to some extent, but it delivers that same like asking questions, providing different outcomes and solutions for the buyer based on what's going to be most useful at a scale, right? You can also think about like realizing that, social media isn't just a social media manager's problem, right? It's your whole team. So enable them to kind of like feel empowered to hop into the conversation. If someone's commenting on, say, a webinar that you're running at your company about like, oh, that seems like a great topic, I'm so interested in this, enable your speakers to comment back, right? And say, yeah, we're so excited to see you share something relevant even before the webinar starts. It adds human faces to a brand-based post.
And the jump on that as well. I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of businesses always forget, that social media channels are meant to be social. And whenever you use the channels the way that they're meant for, especially for businesses, it kind of gives, like you said, that kind of human approach. It humanizes it a little bit more, which then it goes and makes them feel like they're actually almost a part of something, and like they feel included, they feel noticed. And if you're able to do that at scale, I mean, that right there is exactly what you're wanting to what you want. Sorry.
I think that's great advice, because so much of the time it's like copy that has been written professionally and belongs, in a brochure that then, becomes the social, and it may not be the most authentic voice. I'm gonna flip to the kind of the last section of this webinar. So we've all done this great job getting our trends out there, being social, building community, and our potential buyer has gone, yeah, you know what? I think I have a problem that I need to solve, or an opportunity I want to go after. And now they start to show intent signals. And we're in a world now, Matt, you probably have more specific data than I do about the number of companies, because it's a growing number of companies that have the capability in their technology to see those intent signals and to be able to act upon them. But I also believe that, little information can be very dangerous, and there's probably some really good things you should be doing and some things you probably should not be doing. So
Yeah.
kind of start on that conversation.
Yeah, I love to. It's funny, back a number of years ago, I had sort of introduced intent data and more of a predictive model into my organization. I remember I was presenting to the revenue marketing organization around, here's what it is and here's what we can do with it. Hand raise. Yes. That seems really creepy that you would call somebody and say, hey, I noticed you were looking at our website and downloaded a piece of content, and so I'm calling you. I'm like, that would be creepy, and that's not that's not how we want to handle that information. And so, sort of that saying, with great power comes great responsibility. And yeah, I think if you go back to this notion of being customer centric in all that you're doing, and it's really bringing that element of trusting your buyer, the way that I think you can best leverage intent data is not so that you can pick up the phone and call them immediately, although there's certainly instances where that makes sense, but it's so that you can really understand where they're at and continue to provide value to them. So we've done a good job at Demandbase of mapping out our buyer's journey stages, and so our ultimate goal is to move people. Now, we know the buying journey is not a linear motion by any means, but at the end of the day, there's generally a starting point and a finish point, and our goal is to get them from point A to point Z, essentially. And so, where I think intent data is best used is being able to curate the appropriate journey, whether from content and messaging, aligned with where they're demonstrating they are within that buying journey. And then kind of in parallel, it's making it super easy along the entire journey for them to engage with you or with your content when they're ready. So things like chat experiences, easy, meeting schedulers. Caitlin, I knew you'd nod your head for the chat piece, but it's really it's not a bad thing to call a prospect, certainly by any means, and be proactive. But at the same time, knowing the modern day buyer and how much time they spend on their own doing the research, you've just got to make it really easy for them to get the relevant information for where they're at.
Caitlin, I know you think a lot about personalization. So, the line between good and creepy is probably something you think about a lot.
Totally. I think it goes back to, and it can sound again like back to the basics, but put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. And like we all get tons of marketing and sales communications on our own, right? Think about it, like how would you engage someone if you were in person, right? If someone walks up to your booth at a trade show for the very first time, it would be really creepy. If you said, hi, Caitlin Seele, I see you live in San Francisco and went to Boston University, and now you do this. I'm like, whoa, have we met? Like, how do I know you? This is so odd, right? Or, hey, I saw you took this exact flight to get here to this conference. Like, that's too much. Focus on being genuinely useful and helpful, to Matt's point of like, if you can use intent signals to inform like, okay, this person is really starting to actively look at solutions, suggest, maybe industry reports or, case studies or things like that, content that might be useful to someone in that stage. And also, don't be afraid to ask what would be useful. A choose your own adventure type journey can be a really powerful thing for a brand to deliver, because it makes the buyer really be like, okay, I'm in control. I'm doing myself, research on my own, right? On your website. Actually, I'm not ready for that. I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around what kind of vendors are in this space. That might result in you offering a different piece of content as like that best next step, whether that's delivered in a chat conversation on a website or maybe in social media, in a comment thread, right? In email, when they reply, make sure you respond back and don't just send them to a no reply email address wall, right? Engaging someone in a conversation can be really valuable, and you don't have to wait until someone's routed to a sales team to do that.
I really like the notion, even though I see it all the time, I've never framed it in my head of ask them, because we talk so much about, there's so much information, you should be able to sense or use AI or use your brain or whatever to figure out what the next best thing is. But I at the same time, I marry that up what I see in social all the time, where people are doing like a little quiz or something, and you can interact get an immediate piece of data and get a link to more resources. And I feel like that is a version of asking as well. Like, you know, it helps them frame questions in their own mind to get to the right answer.
Totally. We can't assume we know our buyers better than they know themselves, right? Like we can guess, and we have a lot of data, especially on the digital side, that might inform, you know, what popular questions, comments, concerns are, but they're going to know their business best. So just ask. That's the best way to be.
I was just thinking, Caitlin, it's, you know, for us in the digital world, it's all around attribution, right? But it's based on what we have available in Salesforce. From our campaign attribution. But if you think sort of the old school, you go to a car dealership and they give you a little flyer, how'd you hear about us? Yeah, there could be the 5 pre-selected choices, but then there's the other and you have to fill it in. And, you know, it's remarkable if you actually just say, hey, how'd you hear about us? Or, you know, why did you ultimately decide to buy from us? It's so insightful. So I couldn't agree more. I think it's a call for marketers to spend more time talking to their clients, certainly upfront, but also just on a regular basis, and just ask those basic questions.
I think it's a great idea. You know what? I can't remember the last time I have been asked that question. You know, how did, other than like in a consumer, to your point, in a consumer world, they ask it all the time. But in a B2B world, I don't think it's a question we ask a lot. At least I don't see it. I don't get asked it very often, if at all. I mean, and I think it's a great idea.
That's an awesome point, Monica, right? Like if you walked into a clothing store, the first question they're going to ask you is, what brought you in today? What are you looking for? Like, do you have an event coming up, right? Are you going to a certain occasion? We don't do that. We're just like, download this now. That's not a natural conversation flow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great thought in terms of the content. Lots of great thoughts that you guys brought to the table. We've brought a lot of conversation from kind of how the buyer insights have changed, how the buyer's journey has changed, how do people look for trends, how do they get out of the status quo, and how do you start to respond to intent? But is there anything that, you know, I didn't ask or it didn't come up that you're saying, oh, you know what, I really would like to leave the audience with this point?
I'll just share real quick. One of the things, kind of building on your earlier conversation around community and ways that we can effectively engage. One thing that we've, I think, done really well at Demandbase is what we call marketer to marketers. And again, we sell to marketers, but within our own community of customers, myself, my team will often sit in on these meetings. Every once in a while, we'll have engagement. The purpose of them is more for them to engage with other customers and learn from each other. But where we see opportunity, we'll schedule, you know, free, you know, strategy sessions with our customers where we're getting under the hood of how we're doing, you know, doing our own kind of drinking our own champagne. But it's just been such a great way because on one hand, it's a great, there of course is self-serving value, right? It's helping increase adoption, perhaps sort of their affinity for your brand. But on the other hand, for me, you know, the insights that I can get just in seeing how they're using the product, how they're thinking about it, you know, it's so insightful. And so just another sort of, it's kind of getting back to the basics, but it's been a really effective way for us to, you know, engage with our customers in a way that is offering value to them, but also at the end of the day is super valuable for us as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you, all three of you, for joining me. It's been amazing and really fun to get to know you better and to hear your points of view. If you haven't already downloaded the report, by all means, download the report, follow us on LinkedIn, and mark your calendar for June 1st. We're going to have the second in this series where we're going to deal with the latter part of the buyer's journey. So now that we've got our client interested, we've got to get the solution in front of them and get them closed. And that's what we're going to deal with in our next webinar. Thank you very much, Caitlin, Matt, and Blake, and I will see everybody soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.